Good morning, everyone. I'd like to open this Board of County, Polk County Board of Commissioners meeting, August 5th, 2022. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag. All commissioners are present. Extra agenda is on the back table. Link for approval of minutes of September 27th.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Public Safety Operating Levy, Mr. Greg Hansen.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the board, in your computer or in your packet is some information. The first page of your information is basically an outline of the operating levy reauthorization timetable. Assuming that we are going to put before the voters the reauthorization of the public safety operating levy. These are the timelines that you have to live with. The bottom three are set in stone. So by March 16th, oh wait, hang on, that's wrong. That's February 25th. I didn't change it, just changed it on my piece of paper. February 25th, we have to have the measure delivered to the county clerk, much like the one we just recently did with the measure that will be on the November ballot. We get that delivered to the county clerk by the 25th. It gets verified, it gets put in the paper. She takes comments on that. And then we file, our filing deadline with the county clerk is March 16th. And then the election will be held roughly 2 months later, May 16th, to find out the outcome. Obviously, you don't find out the outcome anymore real soon because of the new laws that occur with elections. But we should have a good idea whether we pass or not by May 16th. The other dates above that, the internal staff recommendation, whether it be in November, whether it be in December, and actually whether it be in January, doesn't, that's a floating date. Whenever you would like to have that. I put November, December in case the board or the county wants to have any informational meetings for the public to answer questions and those things before you actually hold your public hearing on February 15th and you do your board order on February 22nd. Those are the last dates. You could have it before then, but those are the last dates that you could use to have that hearing and have the board order in place so we could get it delivered to the county clerk by February 25th. So that's what you're dealing with. Instructions to me on the internal staff recommendation. When you want to see that is basically your call. So just let me know with a little advance because I'm pretty far into it right now already. We're going to have a meeting this afternoon with all the key players or departments that are involved in the public safety operating levy and try to finalize some things to recommend to the board as an overall board. But in my opinion, it's a very narrow focus on the public safety levy. After we make the decision to have and reauthorize the levy, you're probably looking at two different scenarios. If you turn to the next page, you have some facts and then a assessed value growth scenario of what it would take. The first 2 pages talk about a levy that keeps you probably at 49 cents per thousand or 48.5 cents per thousand. That has a reduction of 1 FTE over the previous operating levy. That reduction is in the sheriff's department. Other than that, that's probably where you are. I'm using an assessed value growth of 4%. Talked with the county assessor and came to that conclusion. We could use 4.5. That's a little more risky. I would probably strongly recommend against using 5% growth. But if I can twist the arm of the assessor to say, oh, that's guaranteed, which she wouldn't. I think using 4% is probably a little conservative, but 4.5 is probably optimistic, especially with these times and not knowing how the market is going to play out, both housing and financial. So the next 2 pages basically are keeping the operating levy status quo. No reduction in staffing that, and so that the sheriff would be receiving the same amount of money that he has in the past, and that would be for a total of 19 positions. The DA would be receiving their 5 positions, 3 attorneys, 2 legal secretaries, and then you'd have 1 juvenile detention bed, and then you'd have some community service numbers. So to do that and maintain status quo of the previous levy, you're probably going to have to use 51 cents as your number. So every additional cop and or probably any additional DA would require about a 2-cent increment increase, assuming the 4% growth. So if you wanted to even add more beyond what the status quo levy would be, and my guess is you would either have it in an attorney or a patrol deputy, just add 2 cents every time you do that. So that's the simple math of it. It's really about 1.95 cents, but it really doesn't matter. And like I said, the 51 cents might be, you could probably get by at 50.5 cents on this one, just like you could get by at 48.5. Doesn't leave much room for flexibility in that. So those are the options you're essentially looking at. We'll discuss those in more detail today at the noon meeting, but I just wanted to make you aware of where we are and the dollar amounts we're looking at. If you go to the reduced one where you're at 49 or 48.5 cents, you're basically increasing the levy amount, 13 to 15%. And that's a big chunk in today's time frame because of just inflation's hitting and that. What does that 6.5 cents mean? It basically is going to be on a $300,000 house, a chunk of change, but not that much. So. Be more than happy to answer any questions. You have obviously the 2 most affected departments in the room if you want to ask them questions. I'm just giving you the numbers. I'm not giving you obviously how hard it will be to pass this reauthorization or not. Those are the things that you're going to have to determine that you're comfortable with and the rest of the team is comfortable with. If you pass real healthy, you always think you left money on the table. And if you lose a close one, you go, why didn't I just reduce it a half cent or whatever, whether that would make a difference or not, I don't know. Questions?
Maybe I should. So that the conservative assessed value growth estimate, I think, is appropriate. And I'm more saying this for the record, but if we were to levy, say 51 cents, we could in theory not levy that full amount each year.
Correct. Any levy amount you have is basically the cap limit of what you can levy. We did that in the first time we had the public safety levy passed. We had a floating number because we offset it with federal timber money.
Right.
So that number, we passed that at 45 cents, but we never levied more than, I think, 38 or 39 cents with the offset. And I think we were down as low as 34, 33. So there was a big fluctuation. There are no offsets in this other than if we had higher growth, you could reduce it a penny or two, but you're not going to change it that much. But basically, whatever you pass is the cap that you have established for the levy amount. Just like the permanent tax rate, you don't have to levy the full amount. We do, but you could levy less than that, like we did with the extension service district the 1 year. We went from 7.5 to 6.5, and now we're back up to 7.5.
So we're blessed to have the sheriff and the DA in the audience today. Would either one of you two like to comment on this? You'll share your thoughts?
Yeah.
See,
Right.
something that can happen in general.
Question for both of you. What would you, is 14 deputies, would you consider yourself fully staffed? Assuming all those positions would be filled. So that's status quo. Do you consider that fully staffed?
For parents that all we, not always, is a lot of reaction versus proactiveness. And so that's also going to have to weigh in on, do we want to be more proactive than we are now, or just be reactionary? I think we could use a little bit more staff, but again, that would be more of a policy direction. Especially because we need help in the jail, but again, that might be something that we can work outside of money.
I could easily, I easily align myself with everything the sheriff just said. The same reasons. The amount of attorneys that we have and the amount of staff that we have, which are funded by the levy, are very much in the same place that the sheriff is with his deputies. At the numbers we have, we are very much in a reactive mode as well. Because when you think of reducing either of those positions, there is an immediate impact in so many ways. One attorney, I think about the things that are not being done in terms of case processing. But for every attorney you have, you need a staff person to help assist in that case processing, filing the cases, gathering, subpoenaing witnesses, trial, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we reduce staff, attorney-wise, there's an immediate thought of, well, what can I do of less? It's sort of supply and demand. Do I then have less ability to prosecute certain crimes? And do I then have to look at a reduction in what I can intake, basically, keep everything else at status quo as well? So there are certain difficult decisions that have to be made. Same with the sheriff in terms of what he's able to ethically put out there in terms of having adequate patrols, which is a community safety. I can only hazard a a safety issue for his deputies as well. So he's adequately staffed, he's got people rested and ready for the road. So difficult decisions have to be made. You know, we are at a delicate balance right now. So in terms of the number of lawyers I have and staff that I have, there's very little time in terms of what our court schedule is and our court demands are in terms of sort of filling all the slots every day in court with an attorney. So productions will have an immediate impact in terms of the job that we can do. And so that's a challenging thought. I have to process exactly where that cut would impact. I know that if the levy does not pass, there will be a dramatic impact in terms of the product that we can and our ability to meet our mission. That was radical across the board.
Just for clarification, numbers and the FTE I gave you, the only one who would see potentially a staff reduction would be the sheriff. DA's kept whole. Granted, there are no increases included in this, the options that I put forth to you. You got to remember also that the funding mechanism for both the sheriff's office and the DA's office is a combination of this operating levy and the general fund.
Yeah.
The general fund funds a majority of the sheriff, funds a majority of the DA's office. So it's not like this replaces all the general fund money. This is just to maintain a level of public safety system that we feel, or the group has felt in the past, is necessary to put the product that we want out on the street. So, like I said, everything can fluctuate up or down. To go down, you're losing a body. To go up, it's 2 cents. So just use that as your magic number. If you want this number to be 45 cents, then we're going to have to reduce probably a couple more positions. If you want it to be 55 cents, then we're adding a couple positions. And those are the two main receivers of the funding. Juvenile detention receives a small amount for detention bed. That fluctuates up and down, but with the current environment we're in, we are full with our detention beds right now. And probably there's a need for more. We rent our beds, so we have the ability to manage that a little easier. And then there's monies in there for community service, community corrections to maintain stuff. So all those numbers are flexible. All those things that we fund are flexible. So it's essentially a decision made by the sheriff, the DA, myself, community corrections, Jody, Judge Hill, all will give input, but the ultimate decision and what we have to sell to the general public is that final number amount. And again, I would be recommending 5 years and all those. So what this would do by doing it a year early, we would eliminate the last year of the existing levy like we did the previous reauthorization and tack on a new 5 with a new number.
For sure. I think one thing worth noting is that the world looked way different than we know it today. We had to deputies to spend more time with the folks, mental health treatment. So all that's simply to say, I'm not advocating with the other who want to up and ask for bodies, but we have not been allowed to do some of the things that we had traffic, one or two people on a dedicated traffic team. Our highways are crazy, and they're crazier. 7 years ago, we had the idea of a couple dedicated traffic guys, but those bodies have been transitioned to CRT folks. So I'm just throwing out that the numbers first went. Sheriff did tell me that we've gone up since we started with 12.
12 on patrol, now we have 14.
Yeah, so we have gone up a little bit, but the world has changed drastically. It's caused us to correct some of our original thoughts of how.
So given those needs for MCRT, would you say that fully staffed might be closer to 16 so that we could properly enforce our highway traffic in the absence of OSP coverage?
Yeah. Certainly would help, yes. What's funny is every time we think we're about fully staffed, we think we can make adjustments and have this great. There's some bottleneck, and we never get there to do the thing that we think we can do. And fortunately, we haven't been fully staffed, and so the removal of the 2 MCRT folks off of patrol to that dedicated role has really had more of an impact than it should have.
Just purely because of the numbers and that type of call volume that's.
Yeah.
So I'm confused by what you just said right there. I lost track of how you're moving the chess pieces here on the board, I guess. You haven't removed anybody from MCRT from your team at this point.
Removal from a patrol team.
Yeah, into it, yeah. And that's gonna go back the other way here in the next year. Right?
If we get fully staffed,
No, based on the behavioral health rules, and there won't be combination teams in the future. So you're right. I mean, we're gonna move from that model that you're currently running.
I'm aware of. It's
two separate.
still gonna have 2 separate tracks because not all the 988 related stuff is going to fall to us, but some of the stuff in the 988 is gonna instantly come over to us because you're not gonna tell me that unarmed, untrained people are gonna go in and deal with a hostile situation. We're still going to be involved.
No, wouldn't advocate that in the least, but the difference is they aren't combo teams anymore. And they're back into regular patrol and respond as regular patrol.
I have not heard that.
Okay, but that's my understanding of what the model looks like going forward. They're not combo teams.
I believe that's a separate, behavioral health will have their separate teams, but it's not changing what MCRT is doing. They're both going to exist at the same time, is my understanding.
Yeah, I think they're parallel. And most of those MCRT teams are deployed sort of in the field when you encounter somebody in crisis, right? It may not come through 988. It could come like,
Come through 911 or an emergency, depending on the circumstance.
yeah, so it's a little more fluid.
But yeah, we haven't had any discussion of changing how our MCRT folks.
Okay.
That may change over time, but as you've seen and heard now, we plan on maintaining with our MCRT.
And Hanson's gonna come back in and help answer this question for me, but because I don't know, haven't gone and studied these numbers. How much mental health money is coming over from that department to pay for MCRT?
Everything.
What's that? Everything?
Including the deputy?
So,
So just a clarification, that's what I just went and looked up. When we passed the levy in 2015, staffing in the sheriff's office was after implementing the levy in that, they had about 60 employees in the sheriff's office. Today's budget has 69. The levy's only increased 1 or 2. So the general fund has picked up additional FTE and or mental health money or some other thing. So those are, it's not, this is the only funding for the sheriff. This is the enhancement. The general fund tries to pick up slack when we have money available. And usually the people that get it are public safety. This last year, the assessor's office received an additional FTE, but as a norm, for every 5 we increase in the general fund, 4 will go to public safety and 1 goes to one of our other departments. So this is not the only funding source, but it's the one that requires additional money to maintain basically the system we have. And if you want to enhance that system, I can't guarantee the general fund will be there to do that. So you need the levy to, if you truly want to make enhancements to the sheriff's department or the DA's department, you will have to raise the levy amount. So that's kind of where you are. It's not like this is the last straw. The sheriff will never get any more people and or the DA. The DA's increased general fund wise since the original levy also. So it's a balancing act, but this is the necessary element to continue to balance it for the system that we have.
The issues I have, which really dovetail with what the sheriff's talked about in terms of just on the mental health changes in public safety since the last levies. I mean, both, times, the first time, the second time, but the public safety environment has changed for prosecution too. I have essentially 1 deputy who is assigned to cover specialty courts and now mental health issues in particular. The new docket that has been put in place by the court, which is a very positive thing overall. Evolved to a place where now we're going to start working less with state hospital and trying to doing things more locally with that population. But it does result in one of my deputies being solely focused on that docket 1 day a week and focused on a particular docket. So it's transactional time. It's not simply a matter of arrests or citations being made and then processed quickly through this office. You've got one person solely focused on that, and that's a senior level deputy, which is a higher, more a costlier deputy away from other types of prosecution, as well as the drug court deputy as well. So the mental health changes impact my office in that way as well, far more than they ever did before. And that's just the natural growth. Everyone is seeing that as well. Another piece of technology, body cams, which I'm very much in favor of now that the sheriff is, and also Salem PD is employing body cams. That is, it takes up a very large amount of time for my deputies to be watching body cams. That increases just the time involved in preparing for trial and just not just trial, but for legitimate offers on cases, et cetera, it just increases the time load doing one case versus other cases. So that's impact as well. That's also impact on the sheriff's office too, because their guys have to watch their body cams too. And those are long body cams. You have to also discover evidence people, certain things that have to be edited out of body cams to prepare for trial as well. So doing this business is a lot costlier than it ever was, just in terms of personnel. And that's based on the technology we have, which is very, very positive in so many ways, but it also it redounds to there is a cost associated with it. I think that's part of the conversation we'll have with the public in terms of education about what it costs to do this business appropriately and effectively. But those are just a couple of examples. I've got one of my newer deputies right now who just hired, who's preparing for trials, is watching a body cam that goes on for a couple of hours. She's got to watch that effectively so she her trial. That's just a one case, but that to do that effectively takes hours and hours of prep for a complex trial, which that wasn't the case before with the older technology. That's the reality of public safety today and prosecuting. And also what we lose, and to some extent the sheriff does too, with people with transition, is experience. The loss of my child and sex abuse deputy to Washington County has cratered my experience level in the office. And that's just transaction time that we don't have with newer deputies who can't try measure 11 cases. So with the training is now redoubled in terms of getting those folks learning up. If we lose those folks, we're back like the sheriff. We have to start over. We're trying to attract and retain people. So that takes a hit too on the budget as well. So that's just something that happens in this competitive environment. It really wasn't the case some years ago. And that's a limitation too that's impacted by the current economic times. That's sort of a negative hit on the conversation you're having too, in terms of how much this county can afford to levy. So that's a complex conversation, but doing good public safety is a lot more expensive than it used to be even a couple of years ago.
So I have a question for both of you as electeds. You know, we first I will start by saying, you know, we spend resources constantly to figure out what's the right level of compensation for our people, for example. But I'm always curious about what do we spend or how much energy do we put into understanding what the right level of service is for the population or the demographics that we serve in our county. And so we always want to make certain that we're taking care of people that we employ, but how do we tell the public, and this is relevant to the political side of a campaign, how do we assure the public that we're aiming for the right level of service? And I realize every community is different, but is there templates out there? Are there formulaic processes of people that get paid to analyze your delivery system and make sure it's appropriate by comparison to others?
I'm sure there's entities out there that do that, charge you plenty of money to do so. You know, the way I look at it is our call load and how much that's changed from year to year and the types of calls, because that changes, you know, more sex offenses, long cases, things are going to get thrown out. That's really what we just keep evaluating it based on our call load and just all of these other factors. If it's gone up significantly from one year to the other, yeah, we need to look at that, or if that trend line is continuing to go up. That would be something that an outside entity feels, but I don't know if it's necessarily worth it for our small size.
Again, the people we bring in to do this work, I don't know if I have equivalent sort of system to do, because it's not simply the amount of caseload or the amount of trials or the hours. What we do is, if you are more experienced, you are more effective at being able to make decisions about what matters. You spend less time on a case than someone who's brand new. And the issue is we compete in this valley with similar sized offices doing the similar types of work. That's the constant, is trying cases, assessing cases, negotiating cases. It's very similar across the board. Yes, there's differences, different defense bar, different law enforcement agencies, different judges, but essentially the work is very similar. However, we have agencies and driving distance that pay very differently. So you have talented people that perhaps live in one city where the cost of living is very different. It's still effectively drive to different areas whose services are very much in demand. So that is variable. That's the experience we've had, as the sheriff has as well. And so we constantly have the question we've had is, how do we retain good people so that people of Polk County feel that they're getting the best service from the folks who they pay, so they're safe in this community. And we are challenged by that right now. And we have very, very good people right now. We know we are constantly looking at these other places, we know about them, and have conversations with them about the work here. And that's just true in the private sector as in the public sector. And so that is an ongoing challenge. Retain those people. And also this is a really good work in terms of my office, in terms of advancing salary levels so it's competitive. But you know who we competed against. It's DOJ, it's Marion County, it's Benton County, it's Umatilla County, and now it's Washington County. I'm glad people are interested in the workforce that we have trained here and are, they didn't want to hire people from Polk County. I'd be concerned.
Any other questions?
I have one more question for Mark or the captain. How do you see the new capacity that we're building for crisis response? Well, the requirement for crisis response in terms of responding to calls that may not involve crimes, but people in mental health crisis. Do you see that reducing call loads for your deputies, or is that yet to be seen?
Reducing the call, like based on our number of staff that we have.
Well, so a call comes into 988. My brother is having a mental health crisis. They may dispatch the crisis team from behavioral health versus law enforcement. Do you have,
I honestly think we're going to see that because the ones that we go to now are ones that there's typically some kind of life safety related issue that's apparent at the beginning. So we're going to most of them anyway. I just foresee it, and it's not in existence yet, but I foresee that when the 988 crisis works, we're going to be the crutch for that program as well, just because of, I think you need to come, you need help. This, this could get out of control. Maybe I'll be wrong, and if I am, that's actually good for us. But I just have a feeling that it's going to even protract our time.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the only thing it'll do is slow the police response down to these calls. I think they'll try and triage it with somebody other than police, only to realize that we need the police. And then at that point, is it out of control? Did it?
so crisis teams now are calling you all on board on most of their calls? Is that what I hear?
They're not in place yet.
Yeah, they're not in their place. But
We don't have
In the future.
the new system in place.
Yeah.
It's still in its infancy.
I mean, 988.
But we have crisis teams now. I mean,
We've always had
Right.
crisis.
right. That's so with the expansion of that.
Done in that team.
well, crisis. I don't know that we ever see or hear, but I mean, we have our crisis team paired with our deputy. So we're certainly in tune with everything that they're doing, but if they're dispatched from behavioral health now and they go do something, we don't ever hear about that. So
Sure.
So maybe we're somewhat oblivious to all the side stuff that they're doing. But the type of calls that we get called to, those will still be there because there is some law enforcement component, safety component, criminal aspect, crime has been committed. I think those will all still be there.
We're not going to see a decrease, in my opinion, for the amount of time that we spend on those calls, just because the addition of 988 is going to just create another layer. And maybe it'll work, but
One of the intents of that system is to reduce burden on law enforcement to deal with mental health crises. So it'd be interesting how that manifests.
good intentions are always good. But sometimes it's not going to work when you can't talk everyone down. You can't negotiate with every single person. You can't de-escalate every single person. And people that we go to are the ones that are in that category, and in those categories that we're going to get called anyway.
Well, and the tough thing is going to be, if you're a chief of police, let's say in one of the local communities, you have a mental health provider coming in to say that, no, there's no criminal element here, or we shouldn't handle it that way. But the chief's getting push from his citizens about, small thefts are up and criminal mischiefs are up. I mean, right now, when one of his officers responds to that, they have the discretion of saying, okay, can we handle this lesser, or are we going to arrest and put criminal charges on this person? I have no idea how it's going to work when you have a non-law enforcement person show up to something that probably has a good criminal element to it, whether it's trespass, criminal mischief, or something, and how they're going to navigate what happens to that person from the behavioral health side with no law enforcement experience, when there's probably some underlying criminal component to that call. I don't know how all that's going to work.
There'll be some calls that are purely mental, some that there's unknowns, and some that are more criminal in nature.
And I would say, well, I don't know the things that our bureau folks are going to, but most of the ones that were percent, there's already a criminal component to it.
Right.
Or state. Yeah, or state.
Welfare check kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that the criminal component of the trespass or the criminal mischief really rises to the level that person needs to go to jail or get a citation. I'm just saying it's there.
Yeah.
A lot of times, those local agencies use that as kind of the, the last chance that they have to deal with something, move them from the situation.
Sure.
And the other 988 folks aren't going to have that. And then if they leave and this person's still there doing the same thing, what kind of issue is that causing for the chief who gets the call, the person that says, hey, this person's been trespassing in my yard or sleeping in my backyard, and they're still here, and those people went away.
Mhm.
And so it may be they try and deal with it the first time, and then eventually the police get called. I just don't know.
Yeah.
One of the focuses the crisis team's gonna be working on is when the incident gets de-escalated, you guys have to deal with trying to find the resources to put that person that was causing the problems. So the crisis team will be able to take over that, and you guys will be able to go back on patrol and do your police work while the crisis team finds that person, the resources that he or she needs. So that's one of the biggest focuses they're trying to do is free up your time so you're not dealing with trying to haul them around for 3 or 4 hours to all these different places. They can take that off your plate, in theory. Yeah, it's all theory. It's going to be an evolving effort, but we'll see where it goes. But at least their intentions will be good.
Yeah, no, it all sounds great.
Yeah. Gonna be a work in progress. Wait and see. Yeah.
Well, we might wait and see, but in the meantime, we have to put together a strategy for a campaign. And so we have to ask each other really hard questions about all of these issues and not play in speculative world, because that's not what's going to move a campaign. So we have to talk in realities and where actual numbers are and not speculate on what would be great if it did. Where are we today? I mean, again, Measure 110 has an impact on this campaign going forward. The conversations that are going to happen about Measure 110, we were in the room yesterday listening to these conversations. Measure 110 is a big deal, and that's going to have an impact on the thought process of voters between now and May of 23. So, that's all got to play in this. And so we should be anticipating each one of these marbles on the game set here as we move forward in this, because as we've witnessed before, the number of votes it takes to stop this or make it successful is pretty small. And we've had it in the past. So yeah, we have to be thinking about all these little pieces. And how do we communicate that to the public?
Okay. Any unlisted items for today? Hearing none, meeting adjourned.